Hello, today we will be discussing the Roadmap Rhode Island Redevelopment Index.
This index determines whether or not an area is a good candidate for near-term redevelopment. The index then gives each of the categories a final score between 0 and 100 to determine how good of a candidate it is for near-term redevelopment. The higher the score, the better a candidate it is for near-term redevelopment in the area.
I'm going to zoom in and we can look at each of the 9 categories as well as how the score is calculated. Now each of these categories are worth between 25 to 100 points, and then all of the categories which an area has data for are averaged to an 100-point score. So for an example, if a particular redevelopment area has information on everything but violent crime, that will be 525 points that it could have a maximum score out of. It is then divided by 525 and multiplied by 100 to determine a score on an 100-point scale. That way, different areas that have different data available or unavailable can all be scored on the same 100-point scale at the end. The reason why different areas have different amounts of possible total scores is to determine how strong of a candidate is for short-term redevelopment. Violent crime is an important factor, but not nearly as important as whether or not the ownership is publicly or privately held, for example, or the ratio of land improvement, which determines how much additional land value is gained after the redevelopment occurs. So the zoning category determines how many different zones are held within that one particular redevelopment area. The more zones there are, the more difficult it is for it to be redeveloped quickly because all of the zones are going to need to be converted to a single zone. Area acres, the larger it is, the better it is for short-term redevelopment project, just for improving the area surrounding it. The ratio of land improvement is the ratio of how much more money the land will have value after it is improved. Taxes determines how low the current taxes are. The lower the current taxes, ignoring public lands that aren't paying taxes, the more taxes will be earned after the land has improved and people are using the area. Ownership. If the area is wholly owned by the government, it's much easier to get redevelopment going than if it's owned by multiple private entities, because you cannot coerce these private entities to redevelop without some sort of incentive in their favor. Category 6 is number of owners. Even publicly held land can have multiple owners at the state or federal level. So the more owners there are of the land, the harder it is to get them all to work together to redevelop, and will lower this score. EDEZ. If the area falls within an economic development zone, it will earn 100 points. Otherwise, it will earn none. ILV. ILV is the improvement to land values. So if the improvement to land values are low, it's a good candidate to redevelop. If the area is at least 50% low ILV, it will earn a full score in this category. If it is 25 to 50%, it'll earn half score. If it's less than 25% low ILV, it's not a good candidate for short-term redevelopment and will earn no points in this category. Lastly is violent crime. For every 12 violent crimes committed in the area, a point is taken away, because it is harder to get people to move in when there is violent crime in the area. Again, the final score is converted to a 100-point scale so categories can be compared. Lastly, the scores were then using cluster data, we determined where the cutoff points should be.
Anything above a 43 is a very good candidate for a near-term redevelopment project.
Likely because it has a large number of points in each of the categories listed. 37 to 42 is a good candidate for a medium-term project. It has a number, but not enough, of the categories listed. whereas anything below a 36 is a good candidate for a long-term project because it is missing most of the components for a short-term project. That does not mean it's not a good candidate for redevelopment. It's just something that would probably be best done a few years down the line. Next, let's go to the data, which is the fourth tab. This shows us all the data that we have available in an easy-to-read chart. We have the area name in the first column, the location in the second, and then all of the categories I just mentioned. Zoning, area in acres, value of improvements in land, current tax levy, ownership, and then also a list of the current owners, in addition to how many people own a certain area, whether or not there's EDZ, how much low ILV there is, the amount of violent crime, as well as the primary census tract of the area. We then go to the second tab, which is selection and scoring. Here, we can look at up to 6 different areas at once. So, if you click on one of the areas that's listed, you can use a drop-down menu to pick a selection. So let's look at Ciba-Geigy, and it will immediately tell us that it's in Cranston, as well as the points, 50 points for zoning out of 50, which means that it's in a single zone, 12.8 points out of 50 for area of acres, so it's of a decent size, 9.7 out of 100 for ratio to land improvement, so the land improvement doesn't provide that much additional value. 48.7 out of 50, so the taxes on this land are currently very low. 0 out of 100 for ownership, meaning that it's fully owned by private entities. 23.4 out of 25 for number of owners, meaning that there's very few owners. 100 out of 100 for EDZ, which means that it is in an EDZ zone. 50 out of 100 for ILV, which means that at least a quarter of the area, up to 50%, is in a low ILV zone. And 22 out of 25 for violent crime, meaning that the violent crime here is decently low. So it has a score of 52.8, meaning that it's a very good candidate for a short-term project. Bold Point Harbor is as well, as we can see. Same with Dexter Road. Now, if an area just doesn't have enough data for us to determine a score, not enough data is available to make a conclusion. The MBRD site in Central Falls, unfortunately, is missing 4 key categories, and therefore we feel uncomfortable in providing a conclusion without more data. We can now go to the scoring and comparison charts table, where we can see how each of these scores are broken down for the 6 categories we currently have available. We can see that the Arctic redevelopment area simply doesn't have any information on zoning. The other 5 do. 2 of which have a single zone. The other 3 have more than one zone. 3 of these areas, Bold Point Harbor, Dexter Road, and the North End redevelopment area, have a fairly large amount of area. Dynamo House, Pawtucket Avenue are not as large. 5 of the 6 are in an EDZ zone. Only 2 have decent amount of low ILV parcels. You're free to switch out any of these at any time to look at a new category, and that is how the RMRI Redevelopment Index works. You can always go back and look at this table at any time to see how the scoring is set up. Thank you for watching, and good luck in redevelopment.